Dr. Bruce Cornet, let's start with Hudson Valley.
Okay.
Hudson Valley is one of the most famous UFO hotspots in the world. And
Yes.
I don't know when this started, but you've been studying this for how long?
Well, since 1992. And Ellen Crystal was studying it since 1980. And before that, she was in California, and she was being followed home by craft that were just, floating over the street where she lived, and it freaked her out. And her parents lived in New Jersey, so she wanted to get away from them. She came to New Jersey, and then she heard about all of the sightings in near Pine Bush, so she went up there, and the craft started following her around the same way they did in California. And she ended up with a 10-year study. She wrote a book, Silent Invasion, published in 1991, right before I got involved.
Can you describe this sort of the depth and breadth of the type of craft that have been seen and by how many people?
Literally thousands. If you talk about the night siege that happened in the early mid-1980s,
Hynek,
you had these very huge battleship-sized craft that were floating over the highways, Hudson River Valley, and people would be stopping along the highways and getting out and just watching these craft move around. And of course, Hynek and Bronio did a wonderful documentary or book summarizing all of those sightings. But then it died down in the late 80s. And then it started back up in about 1991 when Ellen Crystal's book came out. And I got involved in 92. The book manager at a bookstore suggested I buy Ellen's book when I went in for Intruders by Bud Hopkins. And I didn't know why he was suggesting this, but I bought it and I took it home, and as I was reading it, Ellen was talking about all the roads around my house where I lived. I said, what the heck is going on here? So I got in contact with her and I said, I'm a scientist. I want you to prove this to me. Well, come out with us in the field. And the first night I went out there with several other sky watchers, the ships were flying right over our heads and diving into the ground and coming out of the ground. And one of them was really amazing, that we were standing together watching for something else to happen, because the ships would come over a ridge behind us, go around us, and then over to a place directly opposite us. Ellen had been out there so many times where she had seen these things, that this was a prime area for observing the phenomenon. And once they got over there, a dive right down into the ground.
So 80s it was there, 90s it was there. What about now?
The last reports I have from people living in the area say the activity is picking up again. In 97 it dropped off significantly, but Cheryl Costa wrote a book, a handbook on UFOs, and she shows that the activity moved from New York into Long Island. So that's one explanation as to why.
During the 90s, there were investigations around the country into these giant flying triangles. People were seeing them a lot of different places. NIDS, that we're going to talk about in a second, did its own investigation of that. What were they? I mean, were they military planes?
Some of them apparently were. On the 17th of May, 1997, Mark Whitford, Bertrand and I were on Muddy Kill Lane. We had gotten together, grouped together. We wanted to go out, and he wanted to see all of this activity. We didn't know what to expect. We were on the west side of the Wallkill River Valley, on the opposite side from the Stewart Airport in Army Base, Air Force Base, and no sooner had we gotten up there on the road and were setting up our cameras, then two black triangles flew right over our head. And I mean, it was, whoa, what the heck? All right, let's get ready, something's gonna happen. Sure enough, it did. Then one of them circled around, and it was at the end of Muddy Kill Lane, and just hovered there, waiting for us to notice it. And it brightened its lights, and so we turned our cameras and started rolling. And Dinah Bertrand had an SLR. She took time exposures, which were invaluable in being able to show that the actual path of the craft. The video was extraordinary in what it showed, because it showed this triangle. When it started to move towards us, It banked like this at a 45-degree angle and didn't turn. It kept on coming straight at us. Now, you know, with a fixed-wing aircraft, that they can't stay in the air very well at that angle. Then it flattened out, and it brightened one of its lights to the brightness of the moon. I mean, it was almost blinding, and I had a lens flare in my camera at the point. Then it dimmed it down, and then as it got close to us, it banked right in front of us and turned over onto its back. And it started flying away on its back. And you can hear us talking about it in the video. And it turned over on its back. And then Mark says, it turned over, it's on its back, you know, and as he's filming it. And then it turned sideways and was flying away from us, upside down and sideways. Then it flipped over, right, you know, that was an amazing move. And then it dove down towards the ground. And as it dove, Bertrand was getting time exposures of this, and a fantastic picture shows it clearly, diving down and slowing down, slower and slower and slower.
It's like a display.
Yes.
It was like a show for you.
It was definitely a show. Then it went down to the tree level and disappeared behind the trees.
You think that's ours?
That's ours. And how I know that, or why I believe that, is that Mark is a Navy veteran. And he was called and contacted by somebody who was still in the Navy, who called to tell him that we had been given a demonstration by Skunk Works of the TR-3B.
You also think that in Hudson Valley and other places, there are craft that are flying around that look like ours that are not ours, that it's a form of camouflage.
Yes. And it's perfect. As I said in the beginning of this conversation, when Ellen Crystal took me out into the field, one of the first nights I was out there, we noticed somebody said, hey, there's something coming up over the ridge behind us. And we all turned and looked, and then I turned my camera and focused on it. It was a series of lights in a row, and it looked like a cigar-shaped object coming up over the ridge. And as it got over the ridge, it spread wings out. The wings just folded out, and lights that were on the wingtips, you could see them on the photograph coming out. So and then it flattened out, and then banked towards the other side of the valley, and turned on sound. So not only did it unfold wings, but it turned on sound. And then Rich, who was in the group, said, no way. And he goes running for his car, and he jumps in, and Ellen says, grab your camera, we're gonna follow him. So I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I'm a scientist. This is maybe the second or third time I'd been out in the field with her, seeing all of this stuff. And it was just absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm bouncing around in the back of our seat as we're racing down these narrow country roads. And then finally the lead car stops at an intersection, and Ellen's car stops behind it. And Ellen said, get out, look. And when we got out, the lead car driver pointed up, and the craft had stopped dead in the air. It was hovering. It rotated around 180 degrees and flew right back over us underneath a cloud cover with the moon backlit by the moon, so you could see its silhouette. And it was the shape of a Boeing 707, all black. And it just went right back the way it came.
You know, you think about it, if you wanted to fly around the skies with impunity and not be hassled, you would disguise yourself as a plane that would look normal.
And I had another encounter, and I have a video of this one, which was really, we had 3 craft come at us one time. I was with a friend of mine, and we were down on South Searsville Road, and one right after another. The first one that came over us was a black triangle. I got a beautiful video of that. The next one looked like a commercial plane, but it looked like a DC-9 with the engines out at the tail, part of the fuselage, but there were no engines on it. As it flew over us, it turned and away from us and was going north. And as it moved away on video, the whole belly lights up. It just lit up, and then it went black again. And the planes don't have belly lights like that.
You've reverse engineered some sound. It sounds like a jet engine or an airplane engine.
Right, and it fools so many people when they fly over and they produce this sound. And but when I do a frequency spectrogram of it, it's anything but. a jet engine sound. I've recorded jet engine sounds many times, and I've compared them, and it is synthesized. Ellen Crystal, in her book, says all the sounds that are coming from them were artificial because they could stop and change the music, so to speak, right in mid-flight.
So it's making people think that it's an airplane.
Exactly. And what I saw was 10 to 12 separate frequencies paralleling one another, each one individually made as in a music synthesizer. And all of the frequencies decreased in pitch as the sound source came towards the microphone. And after it passed us, all the sound frequencies increased. And this is turning out to be quite an amazing discovery for the theoretical physicists, because now with meta materials and quasi-crystals, they're actually replicating some of them and sending sound through, and the sound inverts and reverses the frequencies.
It's a very exciting time to be pursuing these topics, isn't it? I mean, since the New York Times and the ATIP, OSAP, all that.
Yes, and I'm hoping that their work, their interest is genuine, and that they're not being, just a propaganda machine for the government.
Well, you worked for NIDS for a period, and of course people think that's a propaganda machine for the government or disinformation or something. Was it because of your work at Hudson Valley and the triangles and that you got hired at NIDS?
I would like to think so. Certainly Colm said that it was. But unfortunately, during my only a 4-month stay before Bigelow shut the place down, Colm had hired me. He told me because he hopes that by my presence I'll convince Robert Bigelow to keep the Institute going. Ultimately, it didn't. And I think the most clear sign of that was when he told me to prepare a PowerPoint presentation of my data, which I did, like I'm giving here. And Bigelow stayed and watched, and he didn't say anything. In the middle of my presentation, he gets up and says, "Okay, I've seen enough. Goodbye."
Yeah, that's the handwriting on the wall.
Exactly.
Must have been very exciting for you when you get hired by them, considering who made up NIDS back in that era. I mean, your colleagues would have been some amazing people. Jacques Vallée.
Oh my God, yes.
Hal, Kit.
Yes, I met all of them. And Eric Davis, I met when I was first there, and he taught me the ropes, basically, and introduced me to all the people in the building. So it was, I got to meet all of them.
They were doing good work. Studied the triangles, for example. That was some of the work they did.
Yes, and what really amazed me is what Colm was doing, because as you know, he published a paper through NIDS on his idea of the early records of the triangles, that many of them were seen in between military bases. And he thought that this was military hardware. And then when he bought or had Bigelow buy the other, like New Fork and Hatch and all of the other surveys, and assembled that data, he was shocked, literally, because now he had, instead of maybe several thousand sightings across the country, had tens of thousands. And many of the sightings were not between military bases. They were over highways and cities. And at a talk he gave at the SSE in May of 2004, he actually said, "My results now seem to suggest the first wave of an alien invasion." That's the only explanation he could come up with.
I'm sure you go through the scenarios in your head. If NIDS had been allowed to continue, you would have been there when BASS was created.
Yes. Yes.
Would have been on some pretty cool stuff.
Yes. And also, Bigelow never gave up on the Skinwalker Ranch, even though he sold it to try to perhaps decrease attention to it. But then he hired several people, ex-military people, to go out there and be security guards.
Did you ever have a chance to go to the ranch?
No, I never did.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, the activity level had decreased to the point where he didn't really send people out there as much anymore, the scientific people. Did you interact with Colm and Eric about their experiences?
Oh, Colm was great. He told me many stories and filled me in. Eric filled me in a little bit about what was going on with the research team. And Colm told me of specific stuff that you later present in your MUFON presentation.
Did you want to go?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it was very disappointing, but it was obvious that Bigelow wasn't going to send me out there if he wasn't going to continue NIDS.
What do you make of the Skinwalker Ranch and places like that where the activity, it's not reproducible, it doesn't happen the same way a second time, it avoids cameras, it seems to occasionally make a display for some people and other people don't. I mean, what box do you put that in?
I think we need to expand our concept of reality and of a multidimensional universe. I got involved with Brian Williams, who goes by the moniker Sargell 18, in Wanacue, New Jersey, where he grew up. And the Wanacue Dam there has had many UFO sightings over it. Even Ellen shows a picture in a book of that something lights over the reservoir. And Brian, growing up in that town, he gave a number of lectures on it, and it's really spooky of the kinds of people that are there. He says the Ku Klux Klan lives there, the Masons are there, and all of these other extreme groups live there. And he says there are black witches and white witches that live there. And I said, well, why have they chosen this place? He says, because of the vortex. What do you mean the vortex? And below the dam on the Wanacue River, there is a location where the portal opens up and these entities come through routinely. And Brian developed a method of setting up his camcorder on a tripod and then walking ahead of it and taking flash pictures with his digital camera. And whenever he felt something psychically that was there, and many times he would capture these entities, these creatures, coming through the portal. One case, he got a Nagas, or an ancient reptilian ET, standing right in front of him and the portal in behind him.